Video by Emmanuel Isaiah Smith.
Hello, good afternoon. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Sunday, December 21st, 2025. The time is 12:37 p.m., and I am in Miami, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is democracy in America. And before I begin, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make you aware that I tend to do these discourses outdoors, and I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time to drown out the background noise. So please adjust your volumes accordingly. And thank you for watching. So, as I've done in so many other lectures, before I get into the main talking points of democracy in America, I would like to address a number of matters. So, when you talk about transparency in anything, it could be transparency in government, it could be transparency in business, it could be transparency in religious or theological matters. There are so many different applications for transparency. Being able to know what to expect, being able to know what you're getting, being able to know what you're getting yourself into, all of these things are important ahead of time when dealing with people and institutions, so you can maximize your own effectiveness in any given situation. You know, there's an old saying that says, when you go into a situation, a scenario, an institution, a relationship, you should do so with your eyes wide open, weighing the pros and cons, looking into the future, looking at your compatibility with this institution, with this person, making solid judgments based on the information that you have in front of you. Transparency is important because it allows you to make sound decisions. It allows you to make the best possible judgment in any given situation, regardless of what that situation is. And that's important because given the volatility of today's financial markets, economy, and human behavior generally, it's nice to have some semblance of security, of foreknowledge, and transparency makes that possible. Now, if a country, a government, a business, a religious institution, a person attempts to minimize transparency into what it is they do every day, well, that should raise flags of suspicion, or red flags, as they say. Why would a government, a company, a religious organization, or a person want to engage in some sort of a symbiotic relationship with a person or groups of people without letting them know exactly what to expect beforehand? There's only one answer for that, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that they are trying to deceive you, having done so at your expense, not theirs. Now, in this world, naivete exists. Some people are a little more watchful than others. Some people are a little more observant than others. Some people are a little more trusting than others. Some are a little less trusting than others. Some are a little less watchful. But ultimately, it pays to protect yourself at all times, because why wouldn't you? With so many people and so many institutions in this country, in this world, all of which are looking out for themselves, what makes you, as an inhabitant of planet Earth, think that they wouldn't get over on you in any way possible if they were allowed to? All you have to do is build a person's confidence in what it is that you are proposing. And if you hook that person, they're in the palm of your hand indeed. That's one criticism of U.S. politicians that has persisted through the ages, is that they sell you a dream during the campaign trail, and then when they are elected, if they are elected, then they abandon that dream in favor of other interests, while you, the voter, go, hey, wait a minute. What happened to that promise you made to the American voter? We're not seeing it. And then they snap their fingers and go, dang, they pulled another fast one on me. Right? Now, that's not to say that all U.S. politicians are deleterious. Surely there are U.S. politicians that take their oath to the U.S. Constitution seriously, that take their oath to the state constitutions of various states in this union seriously, that take their role as public servants seriously. And that's why if the American voter finds such an official, they should hold on to him or her for dear life. Because as the saying goes, good help is hard to find. But equally true, good politicians are hard to find as well. And I'd like to elaborate some on what I mean by that. So, you have some politicians that follow a party line. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with following the party line. I mean, if you are a Democrat or a Republican, respectively, or a member of a third party, like the Green Party or the Libertarians, etc., the party that you belong to has a platform and a political agenda that you're required to follow. because that's what a political party is. They have a political philosophy, and they want to make that political philosophy the law. Okay, that's the essence of politics. It's the legalization of political philosophies. So, if you find yourself in a situation where you're not exactly sure who to vote for, maybe you're an independent or maybe you're a Democrat or a Republican and you're not exactly sure that your party has gotten it right, you can vote your conscience, as they say. Vote for whoever or whatever you think is right. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not a traitor or a turncoat if you vote for or endorse a candidate or a policy that your party is not terribly in favor of. You're a patriot because you're involved in the American voting system. You're involved in the political process. You're letting your voice be heard in the political process. That's patriotic. Now, I'm not going to say everyone who votes or is involved in the political process is a patriot, any more than I'm going to say anyone like myself who is a political dissident is not a patriot. I'm every bit as much of a patriot as anyone else. Political dissidence is patriotism, because you're holding your government to account for its actions and decisions that affect your life and the lives of other people. That is patriotism. Now, I am a defector. Okay, I'd like to move to another country because my country has made an enemy out of me, and having done so in a very aggressive way. And quite frankly, I, as a human person, all right, a citizen of this world called Earth, a person who has inalienable rights that are afforded to me by God and nature, I'm not about to let this or any country infringe upon those basic rights. Not if I can help it. And especially not in a country that I've lived in for 40 years of my trajectory through time and space. I, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, would tell you if it were any different. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring us to the main talking points of today's lecture. We are talking democracy in America. What is democracy and where does it come from? Some say it comes from the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. Some say it comes from the ancient Romans. Some say it came from the British Empire. Some say it came from the American settlers and the founders of the United States of America. Well, ultimately, the concept of democracy can be traced back to the Greek philosopher Plato, whose manifesto, The Republic, is considered the cornerstone of Western government, period, including democracy. the concept of the people, by the people, and for the people is a mighty concept. It is. It was a concept that the French actually, in the 18th century, if I'm not mistaken, experimented with. And there are actually historians out there that say that the French may have experimented with the first successful democracy. But regardless of who invented democracy or whose idea it was or who tried it first or who tried it last or who tried it for better or who tried it for worse, there are democracies in this world right now, today, that use a political system of citizen involvement that decides who the leaders of the country are, who the lawmakers of the country are, who the judges of the country are, and who it is that the voters of that country trust to make political decisions that affect them, their families, their communities, their country. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy goes beyond voting for politicians. That's one of the fun parts of democracy, because you see your votes in action. And you get to see a real result of a governmental nature, consequential nature, based on your votes, your input, your desires as a citizen, as a voter. You get to see the manifestation of your political preferences unfold right before your very eyes on election night. That brings joy to a lot of people. Some people don't tend to care much for the political process because they don't believe that elected officials or their decisions change the quality of their life that much. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I'd say at least half of the country who's eligible to vote still doesn't vote because they just simply don't believe that the process has that much of an effect on their lives or the lives of their loved ones, etc., and they just rather not be bothered with it. And then there are others who are disaffected by politics. They think it's ineffective altogether. Me, I think politics is most useful in an investigatory capacity. Okay? Governments have an extraordinary capacity to investigate things. Okay, there are lots of resources that are available to governments and governmental officials and their staffers to make investigations about things. You see? And the reason it's important to be able to investigate matters is because, quite frankly, and, without mincing words, the human mind is capable of all kinds of deceit and trickery. And it doesn't stop as a kid. Everyone remembers being that little mischievous kid that was always trying to get away with stuff. Because you didn't want your teachers or your parents or your grandparents or your Sunday school teacher or your friend's parents or anyone getting wise to you. There's something that just feels good to a person about getting away with something. And sometimes people, when they become adults, they retain those those habits and those mischievous characteristics, and then they go into occupations like business, like politics, like law, not so much to serve the common good, but just to see what they can get away with, but this time with dollars attached to it. It's one thing being a child and finding a way to climb up on top of the refrigerator so you can grab extra cookies out of the cookie jar without your parents seeing it. That's one thing. But it's another thing to be an adult and being able to rip people off financially and get away with that. Okay, I want to bring to remembrance a movie that I watched. Really good movie. I want to say it was The Sting. No, it wasn't. It's called The Color of Money. It's called The Color of Money. It's starring. It was produced in 1986. It was directed by Martin Scorsese, and it features in the starring roles Paul Newman, Tom Cruise, and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. And in this movie, Paul Newman reprises his character from the 1961 film The Hustler, Fast Eddie Felson. And in the 1961 film called The Hustler, Fast Eddie Felson was a pool shark who worked with what they call a stake horse. And he would go from pool room to pool room hustling pool games for money. That was very common and very lucrative, actually, for some people in the period corresponding to the 1960s to the 1980s. And in this film, this pool hustler, Fast Eddie Felson, learns what it means to have character and what it means to win, what it means to be a champion, and what it means to find redemption in a very seedy, very antisocial type of environment. And that movie was excellent too. I can't quite recall the director's name, but I remember the director of this film was a political dissident. It starred Paul Newman, Jackie Gleason as Minnesota Fats, Paul Newman's pool rival. Jackie Gleason was also in that film, The Honeymooners. Exceptional actor. It starred Piper Laurie. And it starred George C. Scott, who in his own right is considered an all-time great American actor. He was also in that film Patton, having starred in that film as General Patton, the famous American general. And this is an all-star cast film. I mean, The Hustler is considered one of the greatest American films ever made. And The Color of Money is part 2 of that film. And The Color of Money came out in 1986, 25 years after The Hustler was filmed. And The Color of Money has Paul Newman back in his role as Fast Eddie Felson. And it's also starring Tom Cruise as Fast Eddie's protege, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio as Tom Cruise's love interest. And there's also a cameo in that film from actual pool champions of the day, which gave the film a feeling of authenticity. And it also had a cameo by Forrest Whitaker, a young Forrest Whitaker, who would go on to have an amazing acting career, as did all of the people in this film had amazing acting careers. But it was neat to see Forrest Whitaker in in one of his early films, and his scene with Fast Eddie is memorable, and the whole movie is enjoyable. But that movie is full of quotes, right? Fast Eddie has taken Tom Cruise's character, whose name is Vincent, under his wing and wants to teach him how to hustle pool, right? Not just to win every game, which is how Fast Eddie was in his youth. He just wanted to win every game. All right, we'll play for $100 a game. I'm going to try to win every game until my opponent is broke, right? But 25 years later, as an older, more distinguished character, Fast Eddie Felson has found that winning in and of itself is not always a victory. And this is something that he tries to teach his young protege, that when hustling pool, sometimes you have to lose a few in order to gain your opponent's confidence that they can beat you, and then raise the stakes, and then you start beating them time and time and time and time again, having hidden your skills from the beginning so you can maximize your profit. You see, this is what Fast Eddie had to teach Vincent, okay? And he had to teach him the hard way, because Vincent was always trying to win, and he lost out on a lot of money because a lot of people were like, you know what? I'm not playing this guy no more. I can't beat him. Whereas on the flip side, if he had have lost a few, pretending not to be so good, his opponents would have put up more money against him with the expectation that they were going up against someone around their own skill level. So ultimately, this was a very good film. I believe Paul Newman won the Academy Award for Best Actor in this film, which some people think was overdue. I mean, me personally, having watched the original film, The Hustler, in 1961, Paul Newman could have won the Oscar for Best Actor for that film. He was a phenomenal actor in his day, and The Hustler was, if I'm not mistaken, nominated for Academy Awards for Best Picture as well. And so, as you can imagine, I mean, a topic like pool hustling, if done right, can captivate audiences. You see? And there's a quote in this film that stood out to me. Fast Eddie Felson said to Vincent, his young protege, in one of the scenes, "Money won is twice as sweet as money earned." And in many respects, that's true. Particularly depending on who you talk to. Now, there are some people that pride themselves on having never gambled. There are some people that pride themselves on earning their money by clocking in and out of a job and having never gambled or anything of the sort, or put themselves in a position to win money. Okay, there are people that just don't believe in that lifestyle for personal reasons, for religious reasons, for other reasons. And then there are other people who take great pride in being able to win money. You have people out there that are so good at gambling that they gamble for a living. And some of them make good livings gambling because they know how to gamble. It doesn't have to be in a casino. It could be sports betting. It could be online betting. You know, it doesn't have to be poker games or blackjack games or Texas Hold'em games or slot machines. There are 1,000,001 ways to gamble in this country, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, for all intents and purposes, playing the lotto is gambling. You're putting up money to try and win money back. It is gambling. And some people simply do it better than others. For Fast Eddie Felson, money having been won is twice as gratifying as earning money through an occupation. There are people in the democratic process in the United States who have a similar view. So often you hear this in the news. This county official or that county official or this county regulator or that county regulator or this county auditor or that county auditor or this politician or that politician was arrested and charged with racketeering. What is racketeering if you're an elected official? Well, to put it plainly, here's how a politician participates in a racket. I'm going to take a sip of water, ladies and gentlemen. So, politicians, elected officials, particularly those at the city level, the state level, and the federal level, are responsible for issuing contracts for various things. And we'll use a pretty transparent or seeable or relatable example. Let's use construction contracts, for example. So let's say you live in a Midwestern city, right? It could be Cleveland, Ohio. It could be Detroit, Michigan. It could be Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay, a busy, well-populated Midwestern city, right? These cities typically get a lot of snow, ice, sleet, and so forth in the winter. Now, when that happens, the streets oftentimes get damaged because the frozen ice on the roads oftentimes damage the cement and the pavement. And when spring rolls around, oftentimes giant potholes in the road begin to form as a result of the rough winter and the busyness of the traffic. It damages the roads. So when spring rolls around and all the ice melts, now you have now you have potholes in the roads. And potholes can be dangerous because if you hit a pothole hard enough, you can lose control of your steering wheel and cause an accident, a collision with another vehicle or pedestrian, which is a horrific scene and a horrific set of circumstances. Also, if you hit a pothole and you're driving, it can flatten your tire if you hit it hard enough or if you're going fast enough. So when potholes form in the road, the county government or the city government has to take steps to get those potholes covered so that you can drive safely again down the road. So, how does a city or a government get those potholes covered? All right, it's not as simple as having an elected official just walk up to the pothole with a bucket of cement and dump the cement in the pothole. It's not that easy. Okay? You have to do comprehensive construction work to fix potholes, because if there's a pothole in the road, that means the entire road is probably damaged. So you have to do extensive work on the entire road. And so the city or the county has to hire a construction company to fix the roads. There are construction companies out there that work exclusively with city and county governments. So what has to happen is the county government has to select a trusted, reputable, well-staffed, and professional construction company to go and fix those potholes. And the city government must pay these construction workers or these construction companies with taxpayer money stored in the treasury to do this work. Now, there have been instances where politicians have gone into business with construction companies that were owned by their friends or by acquaintances of theirs. And they would pay these construction companies hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to fix these roads, under the condition, when we give you the contract, the money that you get from the taxpayer, from our treasury, to fix these roads, I want 15% of that money kicked back to me so I can put it in my own pocket. Okay, that's called a kickback. You hire a company to do a government service only if they give you, as a politician, a piece of the money back so you can put it in your own bank account. That's called stealing from the taxpayer. And I've seen politicians, all right, particularly mayors and state representatives, get 30 years in prison for participating in racketeering. It's a federal crime. It carries very stiff penalties, and you're essentially taking money out of the taxpayer's wallet and putting it in your own pocket. Okay? Money won is twice as sweet as money earned. If you can get away with something like that as an elected official, you've won. You successfully robbed the taxpayer and enriched yourself and your family without anyone getting wise, without anyone getting caught. You haven't earned that money. You won that money through a kickback. I would hate to think, ladies and gentlemen, that the United States governmental establishment is little more than elected officials getting kickbacks from companies who they issue government contracts to. I would hate to think that's true. And of course I believe that there are fortuitous politicians out there. For example, the mayor of Miami-Dade County. I think she does an excellent job, Mayor Levine Cava. She actually slashed the county budget with a proposal of $400 million in cuts. So she's issuing less government contracts in the interest of balancing the budget, thereby keeping taxes lower. Counties with balanced budgets have lower taxes. So I think she's an example of an elected official at the county level that has proven her integrity. But on the flip side, take a mayor like, for example, the former mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick. He was doing the opposite. He was getting kickbacks left and right from companies he was issuing government contracts to, and he ended up going to jail for 30 years. I think something similar happened with Rod Blagojevich, who was I want to say he was the governor of Illinois at one point. It's been a long time, but ultimately he was apparently selling seats in the Illinois House of Representatives to people for cash. And he got caught and was sentenced to, I think, 30 or 36 years. But eventually he found a way to redeem himself in prison, and President Trump released him. And he's an example of a mayor or of a elected official that got a second chance. And that happens. Second chances, commutations, pardons, these things happen. It's up to the judgment and leadership of the president to decide that. But money won is twice as sweet as money earned is apparently the cornerstone of American politics. I mean, if you look at it, for example, take gang stalking, for example. Gang stalking is all about kickbacks and corruption. How do I know this? Well, because gang stalking uses very sophisticated personnel mobilization, data interception, and surveillance tactics. This type of monitoring of U.S. citizens like myself don't come cheap. It costs money to monitor a person to this degree. Who has to pay the bill? You have to pay the bill. Fork it over. We're taking federal, state, and local taxes out of your check every pay period so that we can purchase Stingray devices, X-ray equipment, bugging equipment, surveillance equipment, all kinds of monitoring equipment so we can monitor the actions of targeted individuals and disrupt them on a daily basis. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the beneficiary of gang stalking is the military-industrial complex. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, it gets $2 trillion a year from the American taxpayer collectively to produce the kinds of weapons, the kinds of surveillance technology, and the kinds of gadgets that it takes to prosecute a gang stalking campaign. Money won is twice as sweet as money earned in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about gambling in a casino anymore. You could win a seat in a county election, a state election, or a federal election and gamble. You can gamble with a little corruption here and there. You can gamble with instances of racketeering here and there. You can see if you can get a kickback or two. Maybe a campaign donor who wants a favor buys you a diamond Rolex watch valued at $75,000. Maybe they treat you and your wife to a romantic dinner at a 5-star restaurant, $500 for a plate of food. Maybe they work a few strings and get you a $600 haircut. Maybe they pull more strings and buy you $15,000 or $20,000 worth of suits at your local haberdasher. Maybe they go a little further than that in exchange for a political favor or two, and go ahead and buy you a Mercedes Maybach valued at $340,000. Or maybe they do home renovations for you. $400,000 or $500,000 worth of home renovations. As a matter of fact, I think that the county auditor of Cuyahoga County back in, it had to have been, I want to say 2010, got busted for racketeering for that same thing. All right. He issued a government contract to a company to do some work for the government or another. It might have been an information technology company. He issued a government contract to this information technology company. And in exchange for that government contract, which I think was valued at $2 million, the owner of that information technology company used some of his profits of that money to purchase this auditor a $250,000 home renovation. You see, because apparently somebody thought that cash was too risky. No, we're going to give you the government contract. We're going to pay your firm, your information technology firm, your surveillance company. We're going to use county resources in Cuyahoga County. We're going to pay your firm. We're going to pay you $2 million to put cameras on government buildings downtown and maintain those cameras. We're going to pay you $2 million out of our treasury to do that service for us, but I want $250,000 of that back in the form of home renovations, not cash, because cash is too easy to trace. Cash is too easy for the FBI to gather. Cash is too easy to investigate. The Department of Justice likes those types of transactions because they're easy to prosecute. So rather than do that, I'd rather you kick back some of that money to me in the form of a home renovation. That'll be harder for the FBI to find out. And that's what happened, and they both got busted. And this county auditor, it might have been a county executive. It might have been a county executive. He wound up having to leave his job. And I think he ended up having to pay every bit of that money back, and I think he might have got 9 years in prison on top of it. So he lost. You see, money won is twice as sweet as money earned, not money lost. Okay? He lost his money. He lost his job. He lost his career. He might have lost his wife. Some of these politics wives leave their husbands quick if there's some sort of a scandal or something involving them, especially if they go to jail. They'll go ahead and get that divorce, take 50% of your assets, and get married again real quick while you sit and rot in jail. Hey, you can't blame them. They're only looking out for themselves, just as any wife does. And I'm sure they look out for the kids with that money too. But that's just simply the nature of the beast, ladies and gentlemen. Some people like gambles. Some people like to make gambles. It doesn't have to be at a casino. It doesn't have to be online. It doesn't have to be at a basketball game, football, hockey, baseball, soccer, boxing match. It doesn't have to be any of that. You can go into politics and gamble. You're gambling with your life. You're gambling with the life of your family. You're gambling with your livelihood, your reputation, your credibility. You're gambling with all of that. Just so you can get a kickback on a government contract that you issue one of your cronies. So you are gambling when you go into politics and start playing with taxpayer money like that. There have been politicians over the past 100 years who have won the gamble and gotten away with it. There are politicians over the past 100 years who have lost the gamble and been severely punished. But whether you win or lose, it's still a gamble. Money won is twice as sweet as money earned. Democracy is not for sale. Democracy is a political philosophy that says that of the people, by the people, and for the people is the way it ought to be. The Russian political philosopher and the father of modern communism, Karl Marx, put it a different way. He said, that government should be a tyranny of the masses. Meaning that the people ought to be the driving force behind policy and not the government itself. But whether you call it of the people, by the people, and for the people, or whether you call it a tyranny of the masses, it all comes down to one central theme, and that is that the constituents, the people, have power. Yeah, they're in a contract with their government. They're in a contract with, I guess, what you might call the political society that we have. That contract says if you follow the rules and you pay taxes, your government will take care of you. Simple enough. I don't really see any problem with that contract if a government must exist. I think it should. I don't think people ought to be left to themselves without a government. The human mind is too wayward, and it is too easy to use your faculties and resources to perpetrate acts of mischief against people. That's one of my problems with gang stalking. It's not democratic at all. Did any of us ever sit down at a voting booth and vote on this measure? Community harassment, endless stalking, biohazardous germ spreading mechanisms, signaling from one party to the next, all under the guise of national security measures, all under the guise of human behavior modification, all under the guise of social engineering, all under the guise of community policing, all under the guise of the social welfare, or rather the welfare of the Commonwealth? No, not at all. I don't remember there ever being any measure sent through Congress to me, the voter, on whether or not we have clandestine, state-sanctioned, signal-based community mobbing and harassment mechanisms. That's just something that was implemented behind everyone's back, apparently. And why? Well, because now we get to send more money to the military-industrial complex to produce the kinds of equipment it takes to prosecute a gang-stalking campaign. And probably with kickbacks to the varied elected officials that made gang stalking a reality. Now, it's very difficult to gauge who exactly is behind gang stalking. I know it's a national security protocol. I know it's got to do with the intelligence community. It's probably got to do with the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. It's probably got to do with fusion centers as well, which is kind of a combination of all of the above in one centralized location. It's probably got to do with illegal immigration. I believe that this program was probably used on illegal immigrants first to locate, track, and apprehend them. And then I think later on it was used on the general population of the United States for various reasons. Particularly to secure contracts for the military-industrial complex for the types of equipment you need to prosecute a gang-stalking campaign. Okay? I believe this program, gang-stalking, might have been used against terrorists at one time to find, locate, and apprehend persons who might be planning a massive attack of some kind on U.S. soil. But ultimately, over and above that, and despite that, these thuggish, cowardly, nonsensical, and knuckle-headed protocols are being used on anybody for any reason. Just so long as the national security apparatus and the intelligence apparatus of this country say, you know what? That's a person we need to use this on. That's a person we need to use this on. Those are people we need to use this on. He's a person we need to use this on. She's a person we need to use this on. And we're going to use all of our powers and all of our resources and all of our personnel and all of our human capital to do it. Why? Because we are superior to those people, and we want to prove we're superior to those people by essentially disrupting their lives out in public for the whole world to see. We're not doing this quietly. We're doing this in front of the whole world. We want the whole world to see that here in the United States, the national security apparatus and the intelligence apparatus in this country have been given unchecked and unlimited powers by Congress, knowingly or unknowingly, to do as we please, when we please. Why? Because we're the ones watching out for terrorists. We're the ones watching out for mass shooters. We're the ones watching out for illegal aliens. We're the ones looking out for the security of America, so we're the ones that get to decide how this technology is used. And you know what? We're the ones in control here, and we get to decide who's a gang stalker and who's a targeted individual. This country is less safe without us. So because this country needs us as national security apparatus, as intelligence apparatus, we're going to prosecute and utilize, and decide how all of this technology is going to be used, how all of this stratagem is going to be used, how all of this is going to be used, and we'll use it on whoever we want to use it on. If you fit the criteria of someone that would make a good target, we're going to use you as a target. And you'd better not try and come forward about it. Why? Because we already have an entire psychiatric community that's ready to call you a nut job if you even think about coming forward about this. We even got knuckleheaded psychiatrists on hand ready to diagnose you with something so that you'll be even less credible. And then we'll continue stalking, harassing, pestering, and attacking you with the expectation that your life expectancy will go down and you'll do less complaining about what we do. And you know what? The federal government of this country is right on board with it because we've been doing this for 60 years to people with no problem. And there are plenty of American citizens participating. So, you know what? We have our standing army in case you try anything rough. And oh yeah, we got sharpshooters around too. Guys with snipers, guys with AR-15s, guys with AK-47s, guys with grenade launchers, guys with RPG-7 rocket launchers. In case you try anything terroristic there, target. And oh yeah, in case you don't try nothing terroristic, you better not try none of that rough stuff with none of our undercovers, liaisons, or stalkers either, because we got a bunch of convicted felons doing gang stalking with us as well. And those convicted felons, a lot of them went to jail for violent crimes. And we got a few MMA fighters doing gang stalking. Not necessarily the world champion types, but just guys that train MMA in local gyms. And we got a few boxers. Not necessarily world champion boxers, but the kind of guys that like to hit punching bags in the gym. We got real tough guys working for us. And if you try any of that rough stuff with any of our stalkers, we'll signal those guys to your location and tell them to beat the mess out of you. We might tell them to kill you depending on the infraction. And we're doing all this with the full faith and credit of the U.S. Congress. So we feel safe in our thuggery, and our gang stalkers do too. What do you have there, target? That's what the stalkers will say to me, your host. And what will I say back to them? Well, I got a computer. I got my wits about me, and I got some sound equipment. I'll put what I got up against your whole operation. And we can make a little wager too, since you stalkers like to bet so much. The winner gets to claim victory. The loser has to get all their stuff, pack up, and get the hell out of here. How's that for a wager? And we'll just play it that way, because it looks like I'm winning, if you really want to know the truth. And what makes this so interesting is that my gang stalkers appear to know that they're being dialed back. The corruption of gang stalking is that it takes money out of taxpayers' pockets and gives it to the military-industrial complex, many of which have sort of a crony relationship with certain U.S. politicians. And in exchange for those contracts, they're giving our national security and intelligence apparatus weapons and surveillance equipment to prosecute gang stalking campaigns against unwitting people. for sketchy reasons. No one was ever supposed to figure this out. This was supposed to be the new American institution. Gang stalking, the new American institution. It's covert, it's quiet, it's hard to report, it's hard to detect, it's taxpayer funded, and it uses military resources. How can we lose? Well, here's how you lose. You go into a criminal enterprise like gang stalking with your eyes wide open, thinking you're going to deceive not only America, but the whole world. You put together this operation, you trample a few lives, you kill a few people, you rob a bunch of banks, you rob the taxpayer, you prop yourselves up, you feel like you're above your fellow man. You disrupt society with what you do. You disrupt people's lives. You get people sick. You hurt their health. You take years off their life with the stress you put them through. You cause derived car accidents. You help certain segments of the population cheat their way through life, while you hinder other segments of the population from having a life at all. You choose the wrong target. That target picks up a computer and exposes you on the world stage because he's figured you out and connected all the dots. That's how you lose. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.